Sorry, I didn't see you there. The Black Death was one of the world's worst disasters in history. One third of the European population died. The culprit of this disease was the oriental rat fleas that were living on the backs of small rodents. The Black Death came in three types: the bubonic, pneumonic, and septicemic plague. All forms were caused because of a bacterium.
The bubonic plague is the most common type. 30 to 75% of those who had this died. The symptoms of this include enlarged inflamed lymph nodes,
Brooke, your lymph nodes are looking really enlarged and inflamed.
Really?
headaches, and fever of 100 to 105 degrees.
Gabby, I think I'm getting a headache.
And your head's really warm. I think you might be getting a fever.
And last but not least, nausea, vomiting, and aching joints.
Gabby, my muscles ache. So do my joints. I'm kind of nauseous. I think I'm gonna vomit.
I'll go get the bucket. The pneumonic plague was the second most common form of the Black Plague. It had a 90 to 95% mortality rate. Because of transportation issues, victims usually died before they could reach other places. Symptoms of this plague include infected lungs.
Oh, Marina, I think your lungs might be infected.
Oh dear. Slimy, blood-tinted sputum. Sputum is a mixture of saliva and mucus from the respiratory system.
Oh, gross, this is all slimy.
Oh, that's blood-tinted sputum that just came out.
The symptoms usually take 1 to 7 days to appear.
Septicemic was the most rare form of the Black Plague. 100% of people who had it died. The symptoms of this was high fever.
Feel my forehead.
Oh, yikes, I think you might have a high fever.
And skin turning deep shades of purple.
Look at my skin.
Oh, that's a lovely shade of eggplant.
People usually died the day that the symptoms appeared. 800 people died every day from the septicemic plague.
The plague traveled on trade routes and caravans. Its path of death was generally from south to north and east to west, passing through Italy to France to England to Germany. And then eventually it spread throughout the rest of Europe.
There were many effects of the Black Death. These are some of them.
The Black Death is estimated to have killed 30 to 60% of European population, reducing the world's population from an estimated 450 million to 375 million in 1400. It took 150 years for Europe's population to recover. The bubonic plague killed 25 million people, 1/3 of the European population, and still may cause 1 to 2,000 deaths a year, mostly in ages 20 and older.
Funeral processions were used as jokes. It got to the point where deaths were ignored altogether. Citizens looked for causes, and the developmentally delayed, deformed, and crazy people outside town were the perfect candidates. Bored? Go toss some stones at the witch and help stop the plague.
The economy was probably hit the hardest of all aspects of Europe. The biggest problem was that valuable artisan skills disappeared when large numbers of the working class died. Therefore, those who had skills became even more valuable than rich people. The society structure began to change, giving formerly poor laborers more say. The peasants and artisans demanded higher wages. People called bacchini pillaged homes, murdered and raping people. They dressed in red robes with red masks, and only their eyes showed. The horror of the Black Death had taken on a new victim, the economy.
The Christian church lost prestige, spiritual authority, and leadership over the people. How? The church promised cures, treatment, and an explanation for the plague. They said it was God's will, but the reason for this awful punishment was unknown. People wanted answers, but the priests and bishops didn't have any.
King Alfonso XI of Castile was the only reigning monarch to die of the plague, but many lesser notables died, including the queens of Aragon and France and the son of the Byzantine emperor. Parliaments were adjourned when the plague struck, though they were reconvened. The 100 Years' War was suspended in 1348 because so many soldiers died, but it started up again soon enough. The effect at local levels was more severe. City councils were ravaged, whole families of local nobles were wiped out, courts closed down, and wills could not be probated.
Brutality appeared in paintings, too. Here, the style has a name, the Danse Macabre, the Dance of Death. The motif shows skeletons mingling with living men in daily scenes. We see peasants in a harvest festival, or workmen at construction sites, or hunters in the forest. And in each scene, mingling with the living, are skeletons. Skeleton horses carry corpses to the hunt. Peasant girls dance with death. A skeleton receives an infant from a baptismal font.
The demand for agricultural workers gave the survivors a new bargaining power. Workers formerly bound to the land could now travel and command higher wages for their services. In addition, people left the rural areas and migrated to cities for higher wages. The economic structure of land-based wealth shifted. Portable wealth in the form of money, skills, and services emerged. Small towns and cities grew while large estates and manors began to collapse. This very social, economic, and political structure of Europe was forever altered. One tiny insect, a flea, toppled feudalism and changed the course of history in Europe.
Fear and hysteria were the most common reactions. People fled the cities in panic, abandoning their families. Noble acts by doctors and priests were overshadowed by those who refused to treat their patients or give last rites to plague victims. Convinced the end was near, some sank into wild debauchery. Others prayed for salvation. Flagellants went from one town to another, parading the streets and whipping themselves to demonstrate their penitence.
Since the cause of Black Death was through trade routes, trade was greatly decreased. People began to be wary of other countries and their goods, afraid to receive the touch of death.
We also partially got Halloween from the Black Death. The doctors had to use and wear special masks in order to get near the patients. The masks would make the people wearing them look like humans with bird heads wearing a hat. It was a long robe reaching down to the person's feet with eye holes cut out. Where the person's mouth would be, there was a long beak. On the head, there was a hat tied on, and this is where we got the mask part of Halloween.
Partially due to the lack of children's skills to provide for themselves, the children suffered. A common nursery rhyme is proof.
Ring around the rosy.
Rosary beads gives you God's help.
A pocket full of posies.
Used to stop the odor of rotting bodies, which is at one point thought to cause the plague. It was also used widely by doctors to protect them from infected plague patients.
Ashes, ashes.
The church burned the dead when burying them became laborious.
We all fall down.
Dead. And in conclusion,
the population decreased dramatically.
Trade was almost depleted.
And people's habitual lives completely changed.
thank you for watching.
Decreased dramatically.
Trade was almost depleted.
And Marina's supposed to say something. The church buried the dead when...
Fear and hysteria were the most common reactions. Timothy?
King Alfonso